It's the Subs Weekly here on the Blue Room. It's me, Dave Downey, and Peter McFarlane with you for the next half hour or so, talking all things, well, hopefully positive, but I don't feel as if that's going to be as positive as it was last week after we beat Leeds at Goodison Park and after we beat Arsenal and won 2 of our first 3 under Sean Dyche. Things were very, very different against Aston Villa, and it was the first time that, as just said to Peter before we started recording, the first time under Sean Dyche I looked at things and still felt as worried perhaps as I was under Frank Lampard. And yeah, maybe that's a knee-jerk reaction actually, because I don't want to criticise Sean Dyche, but what I do think that is worthy of criticism is the way in which the setup we have just seems to struggle to be able to create chances and score goals. Pete, what was your first thought after Villa? Because I've had quite a few debates with fans who've said, "Oh, you know, we were much the better side. They were really lucky to go 1-0 up, and they were lucky ultimately to get the 2-0 victory after all, and we deserved at least a point." After I watched it, I was sitting there thinking that I felt, and I don't know, it's just me being the typical way I am and being really negative about Everton when they end up doing something like this, but I don't think we deserved anything from that game. And a lot of people have said to me that we absolutely did, and that we matched, you know, and we're much better than Villa at certain points. But ultimately, the old adage came true at the end, didn't it? If you don't score goals, you don't win games.
Well, that's it. I think it's hard to say that we deserve to win the game when we just don't put the ball in the back of the net. And at the end of the day, that's what football's all about. What I would say is that we did. I am seeing positive signs in terms of chances being created, but it just goes back to the fact that we've got no one who can put those chances away. And when you look throughout the side, this is the thing that's ultimately going to decide our fate, and it's the writing's kind of on the wall for me now.
That's what's
Is that
scary, isn't it, Pete?
yeah, because I don't see the thing about this sort of situation is that I don't see really how we can drastically improve things. I can see how we can improve things in terms of creating more chances, which I think we are doing. I think Dwight McNeil, for example, has been a different player under Sean Dyche. He's gone back to basics, and he's basically just getting down the wing, getting down the line, and putting balls into the box. Some of his crossing into the box at the weekend again was he put some fantastic balls into the box. If you've got someone who's going to take the chance and someone who's going to anticipate that ball, Emi Martinez is obviously he commands his box really well. He's a top goalkeeper. I really rate him, but we didn't make life difficult for him at all. And part of that is the fact that we just didn't have anyone really attacking those balls that were getting put into the box. One thing that kind of summed it up for me as well, Dave, in terms of any kind of threat that we have throughout the side. We had a free kick at the end of the first half, left on the edge of the area, similar to the sort of position that Ward Prowse was in when he scored the winner against us. And I looked around the pit, and it was the first time it really dawned on me. And I looked and thought, who's going to take this? And then McNeil was standing over it, and I was thinking, well, he's the obvious one. I was thinking who's going to be the right foot option for this shot on goal? And it just dawned on me that we just didn't have a single person in that starting 11, and I mean a single one, who you would put on a dead ball on the edge of the area. And I was
one
thinking,
that you've seen do it.
yeah,
You're absolutely right there. Actually, I didn't even think there's an excellent point. I don't even think of that. But when you go through that list you just mentioned there, you're like, well, Onana's not going to do it. He's not the type. I've never seen him take a free kick anyway from that range. Garner's not going to be the one to do that. You're really struggling, aren't you, to find anybody? Mopey, I don't know. If we had a striker that was, and I'll get onto him in a second because I've got a lot of criticism for him, which a lot of people have said is unfair. But you're absolutely right. There's nobody there with the right foot who's able to try and ping one in the top corner.
And that's it. And again, you're sort of looking at it now, thinking our only saving grace, really, let's be totally honest, is getting some of these players back from injury. And it's such that's such a negligent way to sort of run a team where you're so reliant on players who have literally been out injured for most of the season. Dominic Calvert-Lewin's the obvious one in terms of his goal scoring, but I mean, I'm even looking at the likes of James Garner. James Garner was the one that I actually I thought of when I was looking around trying to figure out who would take a free kick on the edge of our box, or on the edge of the opposition box with a right foot. It suddenly dawned on me, James Garner. And then I was thinking, well, could he come in and make a difference? But the problem again is that if you've got no focal points up front and no one who's gonna be a threat, and someone who's just gonna have that little bit of instinct to get in the right positions, and someone who's going to have, the tenacity to put defenders. Morpay can put defenders under pressure to an extent in terms of the fact that he just sort of runs around like a bit of a headless chicken. But in terms of actually being a goal threat, I just don't think he has it in him, and we need that up front. And I sort of half tongue in cheek sort of said on Twitter the other day about I'm at the stage now when I'm genuinely feeling like throwing up Yerry Mina or Michael Keane up front is a better option than the centre forward. Say centre forward than the forward play that we signed in the summer. And I'm looking at the side thinking the amount of crosses that are going into the box now. I'm happy to see it, but then at the same time I'm looking at it thinking about who is getting on the end of it. Now Amadou and Nana had a great header the other day. Again, I think I've said before is that we're going to be totally reliant now on late runs from midfield into the box, just the same way Tim Cahill used to do, the same way Arteta used to get goals, the same way Leon Osman used to get goals. We need those types of players as well as a centre forward to take the attention of the defender. But I feel like that's what we need. We need someone who's going to actually physically take the attention of the centre halves when these balls are coming into the box, and whether that just means, like, I'm not genuinely suggesting that we throw Yerry Mina up front because he'd just be out injured anyway. But Michael, if you needed a goal with half an hour to go, I can think of worse options than throwing Michael Keane up front.
Well,
genuinely,
do you know what is, as much as that is like quite tongue in cheek what you're saying there. I remember back in the day when we had to put Steve Watson up front.
Yeah.
At times, I remember we got a 1-0 win away at Southampton randomly. It must be about 15 years ago, that now under David Moyes. But he was the
He
was the
scored a
go-to
hat-trick against
striker
Leeds a few weeks after.
Exactly, that's it. If Max Bent was out injured, if Big Dunk was out injured, then we'd go to Steve Watson. Remember he scored a hat-trick against Leeds when he was playing up front at Goodison Park.
Well, the irony of that was he'd actually dropped back into midfield when he scored his hat-trick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the point you're making there, though, in the more serious way, it's catch-22 there, what you've just explained about McNeil, what you'd explained about getting crosses into the box. It's the one time when we actually need the player that we don't have in terms of somebody who's over 6 foot tall and is able to battle in terms of getting into the air against centre backs, and that's the worrying concern. So even though as much as you say it, you're like, yeah, I'm only taking the piss here literally a bit, but then you sort of think, well, hang on. Yeah. Surely you have to look things that simple and think, well, we've got someone who's 6'4" and you're crossing the ball into the box as the tactic that we need to score goals. Then that makes more sense than having 5'7" Neil Maupay in there just trying to throw a shoulder at people all the time. And it's that sort of want to turn to a little bit here now, because I at the end of that game, and look, maybe it's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction from me immediately, and I've just put it on Twitter there to get some responses from it. And in Sean Dyche's press conference ahead of this game against Arsenal down in London on Wednesday night, he was asked again about where is Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and there's a lot of ambiguity every time he's asked and other people are asked about how long he's out for, and is there any definitive answer? And it's going to frustrate people. It is frustrating to hear that, because you're thinking, well, what comes following that, Pete, as well, are those the things you don't want to see about him. Thinking, oh, is the lad even asked? Is it something further than? Is it something different than an actual injury that he's got? Because we don't really get that information from the club. And for once, just for once, I can actually see why. I can see why Sean Dyche is not going out too far to say how long he actually is and definitively saying how long he's out for, because if you do that, that immediately puts pressure on everything else, doesn't it, really? You're looking at the games you've got coming up and you're thinking, okay, well, there's only one more game or two more games before Calvert-Lewin's back in. And even if that is the case, you've got people who criticise him anyway, thinking that he's no good anyway, even if you do bring him back. So I can see why Dyche and everybody else who's reluctant to say anything about Calvert-Lewin. And more to the point, I've asked a bit of a blunt question there on Twitter, saying, well, do you think if we need to have Calvert-Lewin to stay in the Premier League, are things that simple? And that's referring to the conversation we've just had there about how do we score some goals. Ellis Sims has been there. A lot of people wanted to see that happen. And look, you can't blame the lad at all, because he's still a young lad who's trying to get by his trade, start his trade, and he was in a lower division with Sunderland. It's a hell of a lot of pressure you're throwing on a young lad's shoulders straight away. And, I think Sean Dyche, from what we've seen of how he plays him, is reluctant to do so in regards to starting him, is because he's the only other striker that we've got. But with the Calvert-Lewin situation, I'm of the opinion now that I think he needs to be in, a certain high percentage of games for us to be able to score goals and ultimately stay in the Premier League. Look, I'm not saying it's black and white like that, but like we've just spoken about, where do the goals come from unless he's in the team? You can start talking about his form. You can start talking about how good he is when he's in the side and we see how he plays and whatnot. And is he performing? Is he not performing? But that for me goes on the back burner of actually having an out-and-out striker in the side that has proven himself in the past that he can score goals. Because then we're able to definitively say when we're doing these podcasts, well, we didn't score a goal because Calvert-Lewin didn't play well. We can get back to those simple debates. But if he's not there, I don't see how we get enough goals to get enough points to stay in this division.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing as well, Dave, like you touched on, earlier on about the fact that we're finally playing a system and a formation and a style of play, which would probably suit Dominic Calvert-Lewin down to the ground.
Yeah.
In terms of utilising his main assets, which are just being, get like Carlo Ancelotti did with him. He just said to him, go back to basics. Don't worry about build-up play. Don't worry about dropping deep and trying to get on the ball. Just get in the box. First time finishes. Get on the end of crosses. And that's what he did. He just pummeled the box. Carlo Ancelotti, one of the greatest managers in the history of football, basically said the best thing for you to do is just get in the box and get on the end of get on the end of crosses, basically. And I think that's what Dominic Calvert-Lewin needed to do. But I think the system that was there's so many different sort of facets of the reasons why Dominic Calvert-Lewin's in the position that he is now, and what it goes back to. Every single thing, whether it's to do with his confidence, whether it's to do with injuries, whether it's to do with recurring injuries, whether it's to do with his rehabilitation, whether it's to do with form, as going back to, and then that breeds into confidence. What it all boils down to is the fact that the amount of pressure on that lad, and I'm not saying, like, let's be honest, he gets paid handsomely. He gets paid a wage that most of us can only ever dream of. But take away the money, right? And just think of him as a human being and just think about the pressure on him as a person, the pressure on him physically, and the pressure on him mentally of being the only goal scorer or only goal threat in an entire squad, which is fighting for Premier League survival. And what that boils down to is, if you don't blame him for his injuries. Don't blame him for his mental fatigue. Don't blame him for the money that he's on. Blame the board for not actually giving him any kind of backup and some real backup. Because the thing about having a squad as well, Dave, it's not just about having backup. It's about having about having competition for places. You want people fighting for their own, for their place in the side. You want people who are constantly on the toes, knowing that someone's looking over their shoulder, waiting to take that spot if they don't perform. We've given, basically, we haven't just put so much pressure on Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but we've given him a free pass in terms of there's no one who's given him any sort of real competition, even if he is fit. And the other thing about him as well is that we all know that it took Dominic Calvert-Lewin a long time to sort of find his feet at Everton
and get a centre forward position as well. Lest we forget, he was playing at right wing back under Ronald Koeman.
Yeah. Oh yeah. After that summer we signed about 20 players, and 3 number 10s, and forgot to buy a right back. But it was But again, the thing about him is that it's no coincidence that as soon as he had consistent game time and he had back-to-back starts in his favourite position, he was able to then sort of pick up the form, and then towards the end of the season, with that first sort of season, where he sort of started sort of peaking, and then that second season where he sort of peaked under Ancelotti, he had the momentum from that season before. And I think with him, he's not the type of player who can come straight back in from an injury and just hit the ground running. Some players can. Some players literally, it's like they've never been gone. or they actually sometimes come back with even a bit more to the game. I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin's the type of player who takes 5 or 6 games to really get into his stride, and and physically and mentally. So I don't think it's almost as simple as just waiting for him to come back, because I think it's going to take him time to sort of get up to that fitness anyway. And the real annoying thing is that I thought the Arsenal game for the first hour, I actually thought he looked like the player. I thought he looked like that player again. I thought he looked fit, and I thought he looked like he was hungry, and I thought he looked like he was getting back to the confidence, and physically as well, mentally and physically, he was looking back to sort of getting somewhere towards his peak. He was getting chances. There was a decent, really good header that he'd done in the first half, and I just thought it's only a matter of time for him until he really clicks in, and then whatever has happened after that Arsenal game, I don't know. I think it's hard to it's harsh to speculate. It's But again,
it's easy, Peter. Sorry to interrupt, but I think it's easy for people to speculate, and sort of start saying that he's not asked, and he's got other things and things that he wants to do with his life away from professional football, and he's not asked about Everton and whatnot. It's really easy to say them things when your team's lost and he's been meant to be at the top of the field and he's meant to be the one who scores any goals. That we've got to try and stay in the Premier League. And look, on the other side of that coin, it's like the people are going to be frustrated when their strikers, their number 9, doesn't score goals. I get that, it goes with the territory of football, but there's a humanistic side towards people that I think a lot of our fans and fans of other clubs as well will be doing the exact same thing when their strikers don't score. Is actually taking a second to think about what they've got going, in addition to, like, people start to. We had this same issue with Tom Davis. We've had this same issue, and a lot of other clubs have with their people. When their players are dressing in a certain way, or you see them in certain places, what they like to do in their private lives. That side of it all piles against the lad, like you've just said there, who's been our sole striker for most of the time. He's been a striker himself, and the other irony as well, Pete, which is wanted to talk to you about a little bit more extensively about him, in terms of me simply saying that he needs to be there if we're going to stay up, if we're going to score the goals, we need to stay up, because defensively we obviously we had another problem against Aston Villa. Ball going to that in a second, but with him, the thing about having Sean Dyche as the manager there is, I think he'd fit right in to what, and like you've said, we both spoken about it there with the crosses we get into the box, and how Dyche likes to play that sort of no nonsense approach, trying to get the ball into the box as often as you can, from your wingers. And McNeil, that's the exact reason we bought him. That's why Sean Dyche would have. That would have been a big part of why Sean Dyche was happy to come to Everton and turn them round, would be because he wanted wide players to cross the ball into the box, and we've seen a lot of that so far without having the centre forward person there who's big enough to score goals up in the air. So this idea that how we play if he's back in, he's played one game under Sean Dyche, and it's the game that we won against Arsenal. But the idea that I've seen a lot, we spoke about this on the post match after the defeat to Villa the weekend, is if you've got what Sean Dyche essentially did at Burnley, how that would fit in Everton's setup, in Everton's 11, is that you simply just revert to a 4-4-2 formation, where you've got, the only way you can get Mopé to fit in, I suppose, as well, is have an old-fashioned big and large, big and small up front. You go 4-4-2. I don't think we've got a disciplined enough midfield to do that personally myself, but you can see why that would be the only option where we're going to be able to find the back of the net. And that's where I think both of them would probably benefit from when they're both struggling. I just wants to get your thoughts on that. Do you think that is, well, what I'm trying to get at here is, we've just spoken about the pressure that's on Calvert-Lewin when he gets in the side. Well, even when he's not in the side, there's pressure on him now. We're talking about it. But if he gets back in, do we simply have to put Mopé next to him? Because, look, we're getting to the stage of the season now. We've had it for a while. We desperately need to get these points in. Do you play with a 4-4-2 like that, and that's the best you're able to get out of the both of them? And it's just really simplistic approach that players used to take years and years ago. You think back to when we had played the 4-4-2, and it was like the good old Everton games, you know what I mean, where we had Andy Gray up front with Sharpie and all that sort of thing. Is that what we need to turn to? Do you think that get the best out of them all?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I was surprised that wasn't the way we've gone since Dyche came in. I
Even with
actually,
Sims and it's
even
Sims
with
and Mope,
Sims
yeah,
and Mope, yeah. And to be honest, another player who I'm surprised hasn't been utilised more, certainly in terms of a forward position, although he didn't exactly set the world on alight on the weekend, Tamari Gray.
yeah,
I know I can understand the reason for Dyche to not play him as a winger, because I think he likes the work ethic of Alex Iwobi. He likes the work ethic of Dwight McNeil, and I think, to be fair to those two, I do think that they do offer a lot of energy and a lot of cover for the fullbacks who do need that cover as well.
yeah,
And I can see the reasoning behind that, like, possibly. And as I say, he's coming out the weekend and not really done much. But in terms of when we need a goal threat and we need someone who can actually put his foot through a ball, I'm not saying,
yeah.
I'm not saying that Damari Gray is gonna bag you 20 goals a season, but we probably need 5 or 6 minimum off someone in or around that position. We need that minimum between now and the end of the season, and then add to that some goals from midfield, and then add to that some goals from centre half, some set plays. But we really, that's what we need ideally. Now, Damari Gray for me is the one goal threat who I can, without Calvert-Lewin, he will be for me our main goal threat. He for me is the most likely to be able to pull something out of nothing. He's the most likely for me who's actually able to strike a ball in a way that can trouble a goalkeeper. I would absolutely love to see Damari Gray and Dominic Calvert-Lewin if fit.
Yeah.
I'd love to see even Ellis Sims and Damari Gray if that would be possible. The other thing about Gray is as well is that when you've got Neil Maupay up front, and again, I hate slagging individuals. I really do. I really hate slagging individuals. But Neil Maupay is 26 years of age. I was shocked the other day, Dave. I'll be honest. I was quite ignorant to the fact that he was 26 years old. And I think because he'd been around at Brighton for a long time, and
As in, you thought he was older than that?
I thought I'm not even messing here, right? The way, if you looked at Neil Maupay and you'd never seen him play football before, you'd think it was like Andre Ayew going to Forest at 33.
Mate, that's what Everton do to you. He only looked 26 before he came to us.
But I just mean just generally how he runs, and like this, and I feel bad for him in a sense. But again, it's hard to feel bad for him, like really bad for him. But
when you've just knocked out 15 million quid for someone and they've scored 1 goal in 18 games, mate, you're going to get that criticism. That comes with the territory, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But again, I just mean in terms of what his physical attributes are. Other than basically being a bit of a shithouse every now and again, I don't really see what he can add to a side. But instantly, if Damari Gray's up there, he will instantly add pace. He'll instantly put defenders on the back foot. He can instantly run the channels if we have to go long. He can instantly get in the box. We know that instantly. We've got I'm not. I say there'll be people listening to this think, well, Damari Gray, he flatters to deceive sometimes.
He's half-arsed sometimes.
And I agree with that. But at the same time, I still know that in there is an effective player, and I still know that he does have ability, and it's that ability that I just don't see throughout the rest of the starting 11. Dwight McNeil, for example, he can strike a ball. I know he can put his foot through a ball, and I wouldn't be surprised if Dwight McNeil popped up with a few goals between now and the end of the season. Alex Iwobi, I know he works hard. His assists, to be fair, his assist contribution this season, well, in comparative to the amount of goals we've scored, the assists that he's got, he's added a few more to his game in terms of, percentage-wise. I still think we need more from him. But he's never really a goal threat, is he? Neil Maupay, like you say, scored 1 goal in 20 games. Yeah. He's not, to me, a goal threat. Damari Gray, for me, if you add him in a forward position, he offers more of a goal threat, and he has the technique, more importantly, to actually strike a ball and to actually make a goalkeeper make decisions. And then you add in the fact that he's got pace, which terrifies defenders. Doesn't matter what level the defender is at. The thing that terrifies them the most is pace. And Damari Gray's got pace to burn, so he would be my preferred option if Dominic Calvert-Lewin is unavailable.
Well, the other side of that as well, Pete, and I think again it's something we touched upon in the post match after the game against Villa. was I'm pretty sure if you asked Dyche heart of hearts, he'd come out with the fact that he would prefer to play 4-4-2 if he had those options, like we just explained there. He hasn't, and he'd have to go horses for courses. But also the other side of that is, do you have enough faith in the midfield to be able to do that? Because if you've got McNeil on the left hand side, who does track back and help, Michalenko on the right hand side, Iwobi, yeah, he can do that job too. And Damari Gray, if you weren't going to play him up front, he's the one you play on the right hand side or the left. He could do either. Tracking back's a bit of a question mark with him. But the other side of that is as well, it means you'd have to sacrifice one of the midfield three that we have in Garner, Onana, and Decore, who he's playing in the midfield there. I think that's where he's twixt in between, because I don't think, and I certainly wouldn't do it anyway. From enough of what we've watched this season, we couldn't go without having three central midfielders that we have. Even under Lampard, I just don't think we'll have enough there, because you'd be sacrificing a lot of what Onana can do going forward, because he'd have to sit a lot deeper if there's only a two-man midfield. And Garner, we've known in the past, when he started to try and wander up the pitch, he's not that player. That's just not his game. He hasn't got that in his locker to sit off on the edge of the box and try and strike a ball like we've just been talking about. And Decore is probably the only one of those three who can do that. And yet I still don't fully trust him. I know he's had a couple of decent games, but he still wouldn't be in my starting 11 at the club. So that's where I think there's an issue, where he's probably not being tempted to do that in terms of putting two strikers up front, a big and a small, when Calvert-Lewin's fit up, remain to be seen. But it'll be getting to the stage soon where things are looking pretty desperate. And by that, I'm not trying to exaggerate too much on that, but we've got two away games where I don't think we're going to get a point from. Against Arsenal away, I mean, you watch that behind the couch, don't you? And then Forest away as well. That's going to be a really tough game. I know they've struggled. That's a 6 points in itself, really, because they're in and amongst the sides that are close to the bottom three as well. These are two huge games for us. If we lost both of them, mate, we could be well adrift by that point. So therefore, the sort of last thing as we've gone through the 11 there is that back four. I wasn't too happy with Connor Cody at the weekend, certainly for the second, when Buendia just simply walks past them and puts his foot through the ball. I guess the one I want to ask you now is like, we've just danced around it quite a bit in this, people. How are you feeling about us staying in this division? Even with Sean Dyche coming in, because I think we had this discussion when he first came in, points totals of the first few games that he's got and things. And if you'd have said to either of us, would you take 6 points from his first 4 games, given that we had Liverpool and Arsenal twice? Arsenal will be the 5th game, but if we had Liverpool, Arsenal, Leeds and Villa, would you take 6 points from those 4 games? I think many of us would have bit your hand off, but as the way the league's gone, the results went against us at the weekend. We went back into the bottom 3. Leeds won. Thankfully, Bournemouth and Southampton lost. They look like the 2 below us, but that one other position, we're the ones that occupy it right now. What's your general feeling towards this and the games we've got left? Because I can't stop looking at the fixtures that we've got remaining.
Well, I think that's it. One of the things about the Forest game, the big thing for me is just do not lose. But but it's going to be such a tough game to get anything from. But the biggest reason for that, Dave, is that the amount of points that we've gifted to those teams around us this season, and I mean gifted. I mean, Wolves were like dead and buried when we played them. When we actually played them, and since then we gave them the confidence, and all of a sudden they're getting points on the board to score. They're looking more confident. Leeds are sort of up and down. West Ham, again, another team. West Ham hadn't won for ages. We end up going to their place 2-0, and then they've scored another 4 goals at the weekend. West Ham, another team, we're up and down. Southampton, again, we gave them the boost, which they needed. And the thing for me, Dave, is that we're getting these points together, and the frustrating thing is that at a time when in a couple of weeks ago you would have been looking at it thinking, right, we might be able to pull away now. All the other teams around us are also now starting to get a bit of form and starting to sort of click a little bit. And a lot of that's to do with the fact that a lot of these teams have made signings in January as well, by the way. They've freshened up the squad. a lot of teams have actually done what we've, or some teams around us have done what we've done and have replaced the manager or in the process of replacing managers, which again will potentially give them a boost. But ultimately, if we go down this season, Dave, it's the fact that we're the lowest scorers in the Premier League, and we're the lowest scorers in the Premier League.
They didn't
Who had
sign a striker. It's simple as that, really, isn't it?
who had an opportunity to basically put that right. We had an owner who promised us a striker, who acknowledged that we needed one. By the way, we need a striker. Yep. We'll get a striker. Now, I look at that and think, well, if we go down, it's not the fans' fault. It's not, it's nothing to do with the fans. I don't even. It's weirdly
nothing to do with Calvert-Lewin either. To an extent, like we've just explained.
This is the thing. I weirdly don't even blame the players if we go down. I fully blame the people who are in charge of recruitment.
Who are the only ones that are able to address it as well as the players.
That's it. Because no one's telling me that Sean Dyche came in and said, I don't need a striker. I don't want one.
Yep.
He needed one. I don't think any of them players would go into the board and say, nah, do you know what? We're all right. We're sound here. We've got enough players to stay up. We've got enough, we're happy with the forward line. Don't think any fan would say, yeah, we'll be all right. We've got a great forward line. Not one person.
It's almost like, though, it is almost exactly what you're saying there, spot on. It's almost like when he first came in his first press conference, the first thing he was saying was, yeah, we'll add a few, the typical thing that managers say when it comes to transfer windows, we'll add if we can, if there's one becomes available. The transfer market's a difficult place to go to in the winter and all that. So, the traditional cliches that people come out with. But then he started saying, we've got some really good players here. We've got really good players. And the board must have been sat there. And this is not a slight on Dyche, because he's going to say those things because he's a professional manager. He can't go in, like you just said there. He can't bounce in there and say, right, well, he's crap, and I want him replacing, and we need another striker. He's not going to say that directly. But the board must have been buzzing when he comes in and says those things, thinking, yeah, that's taking the pressure off us, because he's there now and he's got to sort it out. That's how much of a gang of shitbags that we have who own the football club and who run the football club, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely, and again, it's just pure negligence, negligence. And the other thing about it as well is, Dave, is that this is one of the things about some of the players, like a lot of the players that we've signed over the last few years. The amount of managers who've come in and said, "Oh, they're a great player," and they play players who we've been watching for a season or two, who we look at and go, they're not the same player that you think they are. You know what I mean? You look at them and you think you're playing them in a way that I think you're expecting them to be something they're not.
Yeah.
And do you know what I mean? Now, at the end of the day, like Sean Dyche might have come into Everton and thought, wow, Alex Iwobi, he's an attacking player. He's got a lot of flair.
He must have thought it was Christmas when he saw a lot of our players and he kept him under Burnley. He was miracle when he was at Burnley.
Exactly, but that's the thing, because I think from the outside looking in, there's probably a lot of players that we signed where other people probably think they're a good player and they're, definitely get a tune out to them. Well, I'm telling you now, like, we've been watching these players, and I say I'm not even slagging the players, I'm just saying it's a fact. We know that there's no goals in this side because we've watched them all the time. We're not going in blind. Like, I'm not saying that Sean Dyche would be that daft, by the way, because he will have researched and he will have had a look at these players.
Yeah, he's got a team of analyzers with him, hasn't he?
Yeah. But I'm sure he would have, but I'm sure there would have been a part of him that was probably thinking, right, if the worst comes to the worst and I don't get anyone in, I can get more out of them. I think, to be fair to him, he is getting more out of them. But the thing is that you can't get more. There's one thing in football that you can't really teach is scoring goals. It's like a weird thing. You can sort of coach someone and make them better at it. But in terms of just having a natural instinct, it's a cliche, but it's true. Your goal scorers are such a crucial part of your football club, and there's a reason why they're expensive. There's a reason why they are hard to come by.
Yeah,
but the thing is that we still haven't replaced Romelu Lukaku from when we sold him, and then we stayed up by the skin of our teeth last season. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, by the way, we signed him, and I think it was Marcel Brands who said, stick with him. Don't spend Lukaku money on a forward. Stick with him. He'll come good. And to be fair to him, it took a while, but still. But since last season, when we stayed up on the last, with 2 games to go, we survived by the skin of our teeth. We sold our top goal scorer.
And then still didn't do anything about it.
Sold our top goal scorer. And then we come to January and we look at it, and I don't think anyone was really disappointed to see Anthony Gordon go. I certainly wasn't. But we got good money for him. And then we didn't. And then even then, we didn't invest that money in a forward or forwards or any kind of attacking threat. And I look at it and think, I don't buy the excuses. Every single team around us, every single team in the Premier League signed players in January, and we signed zero. And we were the team who needed them the absolute most.
Yeah.
So if we go down, it's not the fans' fault, it's not the players' fault, it's not the manager's fault. It's purely down to the people in charge of recruitment, and ultimately, it's down to the board.
Spot on, mate. I think that's the perfect way of ending this pod. As sad as it is, I think you're right, and I think ultimately, when you come to end of seasons with any club that goes down, again, it's another old adage, isn't it? That, you know, if you get relegated, then you probably deserve it. And you know, hopefully, in 2 months' time, we're not sitting here saying that, but sadly, it's touch and go, isn't it? And that's even if you're optimistic about this. But yeah, we'll continue to be a bag full of content coming up on the Blue Room. We'll have the post match after the game against Arsenal on Wednesday, and obviously we've got the Forest game to come as well. Let's hope that we're still within fight and touch and distance of staying in this division, and I don't say that lightly either. But Pete, thanks so much as always, mate. That monologue you finished with there was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, nice one, Dave. Well, just keep the faith.
Yeah,
as
that's
hard
all we
as it
can
is,
do, mate. It's pure blind faith. That's all we've
blind
got
faith.
left, mate. That's all we've got left. Thanks for listening, everyone, and there'll be another podcast Tuesday. Matt will be back with another Subs Weekly of this week. We'll speak to you soon.